Cool. We're going to talk to next agenda item, which is really about ADUs. So let's see. Agenda number 4, which is the Municipal Code Amendment to the CMC to clarify city standards for the size of accessory dwelling units, Chapter 19.112, for clarifications and consistency. Application numbers MCA 2018-04, and application through City of Cupertino, location citywide. So we've got from our staff, John, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Wang. Yes, I'm John Martier. I'm an associate planner with the city's Community Development Department. And for the last few years, I've been working closely with other members of staff, but kind of taking the lead on the ADU revisions, mostly starting with the state's aggressive efforts in 2016 through present day to encourage these types of developments throughout single-family neighborhoods. So starting off with what we are looking at, and Chair Wang, you read the subject as stated in this slide right here, that we are just amending 19.112 accessory dwelling units and to allow for larger size ADUs within single-family neighborhoods. And the amendment is quite small, but it works with our 2019-2020 City Work Program under the community livability sections, which states specifically provide incentives to build ADUs, which provide affordable housing opportunities by reviewing ordinances and reducing fees. So through this this application, we're looking to provide a carrot to incentivize folks to build these ADUs, and that is removing one of the size restrictions that was placed in the ordinance about 2 years ago on property owners within single-family neighborhoods. And this is essentially to limit the 10% of the net lot area maximum for homeowners. Again, pretty simple. If you have if you have an 8,000 square foot lot, you're limited to an 800 square foot ADU, regardless of whether you hit your 45% FAR maximum. If you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you're limited to 500 square feet, which in a sense was sort of problematic in the sense that we had allowed 600 square foot ADUs on lots less than 10,000 square feet for years and years and years, even before the state had come in with these incentivized bills and assembly bills and Senate bills and whatnot. So in a sense, a couple years ago when we went through our third round of revisions of this ordinance, we kind of went backwards in a sense. So by eliminating this 10% restriction to net lot area, we are essentially kind of going back and correcting that, not a mistake, but going back and allowing folks to build large ADUs and improve upon what we've had. One thing to take a note is that all other development standards remain. You still have the 45% FAR standard that will restrict the size of ADUs. If you do choose to do a detached ADU, you're limited to 30% of your usable rear yard area, which can limit you, and in many cases, especially on smaller lots where you would only have 1,500 square feet of usable rear yard. So in a sense, you would only be allowed, hypothetically, if you had that 1,500 square foot net usable rear yard area, you would only allowed to have a maximum of 500 square feet, even if you do have, let's say, a 6,000 to 7,000 square foot lot, to say. So you would be, one of the big changes, you will be allowed to maximize your ADU into the 45% FAR, which we don't think is going to be much of a problem since you'll be able to build that out anyways, as if you were to build a new 2-story home or a new single-story home and whatnot. The recommended actions that the proposed actions are, that the Planning Commission finds the proposed actions are exempt from CEQA, and 2, to adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, amending Chapter 1911, 19112 accessory dwelling units. Any future hearing dates are tentative at this point, depending on the actions of tonight and whatever changes that are recommended from the Planning Commission. So the first reading is tentatively scheduled for August 6th of 2019, with the second reading August 20th of 2019. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, any comments, questions from commissioners? Commissioner Saxena.
In terms of recognizing these units as BMR, will the increased size have an impact on that at all? Or is it just something, does it play into the picture at all?
No, in fact, these are affordable by design. The state does allow ADUs to go up to 1,200 square feet. So in fact, we are being slightly more restricted than what the state gives for a maximum in terms of what the state would allow for. So I wouldn't necessarily describe them as BMR, as they're not income restricted. Again, they're affordable by design, and they count towards our moderate income level home housing, which is 80 to 120% of average rental income, of AMI rather. Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Fung.
So I had a question about the scope of the hearing tonight. There's, I attended, on behalf of the Planning Commission, I attended the Housing Commission. Commissioner Moore was there as well, which would have been about a month ago. That was a much broader scope presentation at that time, and it's mentioned in the staff report. So I'm curious whether you're taking all that input or whether this single item is what's moving forward to the council. Just the change in the 1,000-foot change.
Yes, that was always the intent, even at the Housing Commission. The Housing Commission had requested that we do a presentation in terms of where we are with the ADU amendment and whatnot. We did ask for some feedback from the Housing Commission and some recommendations. But at this point, and I can put on the slide what the recommendations were, as stated in the staff report. The Housing Commission had a list of recommendations, exploring the creation of ADU loan program, considering increasing the size of 1,200 square feet, and whatnot. Certain things like considering increasing the size of 1,200 square feet could be in the scope of the Planning Commission if they see fit to do that. Other of these items would probably take a little bit more input and direction from City Council.
So it's not your intent on the proposed dates in August, it's not your intent to discuss anything outside of this change in the...
Not at all, not at all.
No, because at this point, some of these additional items, with the exception of increasing the size, will require some changes to our resources.
Okay.
And then we'll require staff for the next go-around for the our work program for next fiscal year.
I asked just because I think, I'd engaged in discussions with some of the housing commissioners beforehand and afterwards, and I think that, I didn't know when the appropriate time to bring those clarifications. It sounds like it may not be at this time.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
So are we still looking at AB 68?
Yes, and I'll put that slide up too. to show. This is similar to, again, a lot of these slides were presented to the Housing Commission as an update. AB 68 is moving through the state right now. It hasn't been approved. We are monitoring it, and if we do need to make revisions in the future, we will do that as mandated by the state of California. And I think that kind of goes into part of the reason why we're limiting our scope of the revisions right now, as to not contradict anything that's going to have to be changed anyway in the future. So we want to provide an incentive at this point, but again, not having to undo what we've proposed to be done. So.
Yeah, also from that Housing Commission meeting, they mentioned changes that were made to the fee structures, and they talked about building permit fees, and that in July 2018, the plan check and inspection fees were reduced. Do you have that slide also?
I do, it's right here. So, as one of the council objectives in the work program was to reduce the fees. About a year ago, we found that the building inspection and plan check fees were quite high, and so staff had recommended to the building department to propose a revision to the fees to separate ADUs from how we look at single-family home developments. So in the new fiscal year of the July 2019 fiscal year, we had the building had recommended these changes, and they were adopted by council. As you can see, these reduce the fees anywhere from 58 to 82% for homeowners.
Commissioner Moore?
Okay, could you explain what a junior ADU is, going back to AB 68? And then what would happen if so the example that was given during the Housing Commission meeting was that there was a homeowner who had a 4,500 square foot lot, and they wanted to have an ADU that was larger than 450 square feet. So let's take that as a hypothetical and now add, let's assume that AB 68 does get passed. What could we end up seeing on a lot?
You could see multiple things. Again, the AB 68 could be revised through as it goes through the Assembly and then further goes through the Senate. So you can see a few things. You can see multiple ADUs on the site. You could see one JADU and one standard ADU. For clarification to your original question, what is a JADU? So JADU is basically a separate unit on site that is no more than 500 square feet. And it's built completely within an existing principal dwelling unit, and is not necessarily required to have its own bathrooms. Correct, thank you. But you are required to have your own kitchen and whatnot too. So that's what it is. So and you are allowed to have internal access, where with a regular ADU, cities have the discretion to not allow that. But with the JADU, cities are required to allow that if so proposed.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused. So the junior ADU you're saying it's within the main dwelling? Okay, so if you had a house, it's not going to change the look of it. Okay, none of that's going to change, but they can basically rent that out, that space. They would probably have to plumb a kitchen sink in there and have a counter area for, and some kind of refrigerator for a little kitchenette, but no bathroom would be required, right? Okay. And then, so what happens if you do this 10%, if you strike the 10% limit, then for the 4,500 square foot lot? And when you say 45% FAR ratio, could you also talk about that, and what difference does it make if you've got a 1-story and a 2-story house?
So starting backwards, going with the explanation of what FAR is. FAR counts all floor area within first or second floor. So if you have 1,000 on the first floor, 1,000 on the second floor, you basically have 2,000 square feet of floor area, which would count against your lot size. Okay. Striking at 10%, and again, a JADU is a JADU. You can't be more than 500 square feet. So that's that. One of the other standards for limiting the size of an ADU would also be that it can't be more than 50% of the livable area of a home. So if you have let's say a 1,500 square foot home, you have a 500 square foot garage, the 500 square foot garage will not count as the total livable area. So you still be limited to 500 square feet of an ADU, regardless of your lot size and regardless of your FAR limitations too. So there's still those standards that are out there.
I've got 15 quick questions you should be able to answer like pretty
Absolutely.
easily, just to get everyone up to speed on where we are on ADUs. I think the first question is, it's permitted just anywhere that's R1 right now, right?
Correct.
So it's just R1 or
No,
or all
even
R's residential?
any zoning that permits a single family designation. So even in a zoning that's like P-res, for example.
P-res, okay.
Yeah.
All right, got it. And the number of ADUs allowed right now is currently 1 in the city, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Once you have a shed and an ADU, is there anything,
No.
no issues there? Okay.
No.
All right, and then parking requirements right now is just off-street parking spaces, 1 per ADU, except for a half-mile designation, the transit designation that's next near a transit stop.
Yes. You can convert a garage as long as you can provide the equal amount of space on site. So you can do tandem, any configuration, as long as you can provide that.
And we have an occupancy requirement today that the property owner must live on site. Is
No,
that
we do
correct?
not.
We don't.
No, we don't.
We do not.
No.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner.
That would be for Airbnb, I believe.
Yes.
And number of residents, how many people can live in the ADU on the lot?
We don't have a restriction on that.
We have the normal restriction of how many people can live in a house in an area today.
We don't have that.
We don't have any restrictions? Interesting. Okay, and then size, this is what we're talking about. Height limits for an independent one, is that 14 feet or
I believe it's 15
15,
to 16
okay.
feet, correct?
16? Okay.
15, 16 feet.
All right. And then design, do you have a requirement that an ADU has to match the house in exterior design today?
Not anymore.
That went away?
That went away a while back, yeah.
Okay. And then we're talking about fee restrictions that were here, that removals, okay. And then health and safety, do you have any fire sprinkler code requirement on new?
Not if it's not required for the principal dwelling unit. It's not going to be required for the ADU.
Okay. And then can homes be on wheels?
That's a good question. That would be considered a mobile home if it's on wheels. If they remove the wheel and establish on a permanent foundation, that would be different. Interesting. I've been getting that question quite a lot lately.
I know, I've been hearing it a lot too, that's what I'm asking.
So,
Okay, and then enforcement provisions are paid by whom, and what will that cost the city just to enforce the ADUs? Will the fees be enough for you to keep the code enforcement on that?
Can you clarify enforcement provisions in terms
It's just
of?
normal, like going out there, will you have enough in fees to cover like the checks, the permits, you guys being out there doing inspections?
Code enforcement in general is supported by a general fund. We don't collect fees, and particularly just to cover code enforcement. So, and I don't know if we have done that calculation. We can kind of look into what it costs to employ.
I would suggest we
one
look into it,
code
only
enforcement
because
hours, but-
LA went from 80 applications to 4,000 or something like that. So some ridiculous number. Okay, and then short-term rentals of ADUs, do we have any rules on those?
Well, whatever's in our short-term rental ordinance would cover ADUs also.
Okay, so they haven't been separated out by the state. Okay, and can these units ever be separated for sale?
No.
Okay, that's a definite no. And is there solar panel requirement for any of these?
No.
Okay, all right, cool, thanks.
I had a follow-up question. So, with no number of occupants requirement and up to 16 feet, you could pretty much have 2 units with some wooden stairs or a bunk units built there.
Well,
Would
we
that be legal?
we do not allow 2-story.
No, but this
Yeah.
bunked with a bunk bed, bunk floors.
We would consider that a second floor, so we wouldn't allow for any second story, even a loft.
I was gonna say loft, yeah, 16-story no loft.
So what we have done in the past is, even some recent applications for an ADU, we have limited this. We've actually asked folks who, even after 16 feet, if they have a floor from the loft area that's more than, 6 feet, we've asked to lower that to even 5 feet, so it wouldn't be considered livable space.
Okay, so if it's less than 5 feet, then you don't consider it as livable space.
Right.
Does a tree house count as an ADU?
That's a whole separate discussion.
That's actually in the shed territory or accessory structure, right?
Yeah.
I think there was, the chairman actually asked a question about if you had a shed. I believe the shed actually counts against the FAR, so
It does.
that would cause a reduction in the size of the ADU.
Sure, if that was what you were asking, yes, it would. Yes. Any covered structure would.
Can I ask a general question then? I've been hearing this, I don't know if it's true or not, I've been hearing that the staff has been heavily recommending that people not build basements. Would basements count as an ADU, or basements are on their own? Because basements are in a weird territory.
You can convert a basement area to an ADU as long as it meets the size restrictions. We do have some very strict light well requirements in the city that have been discouraging towards people putting in basements and conversions. But there are ways to accommodate an ADU and also meet our standards if you're creative enough to get that done.
I've heard about that.
The basement issue is because basement space doesn't count toward the FAR, is that correct?
That's true too, but the bigger issue, which I don't want to get too far into the weeds about, is really just the light well size, and that's really discouraging.
So, yeah, I would like to just learn a bit more about that you discourage by requiring much larger light wells so that natural light goes in. Is that the...
We discourage very small light wells, particularly for two-story homes. Our maximum size is what the residential code has the minimum. So essentially a 3x3 by bedroom would be our maximum light well size for two-story homes.
Okay, any other questions from the commissioners before we go to
So
public?
again, maybe a question related to the scope. In the presentation to the Housing Commission, there was discussion about consideration of waiver of Parkland dedication fee. Is that that's not part of what we're discussing today?
Not at all. I mean, months and months ago, we had discussed it internally. However, it was discouraged to go that route since we would have to modify the park standards chapters of the municipal code. And if we were to waive those fees, it would have to be ordained in the municipal code, as they are a fee that's part of the CMC.
Yeah, it would be great to have a discussion. I mean, one of the barriers to ADU production has been repeatedly identified as impact fees, with the Parkland fee being, particularly since you're fitting into the FAR, in some respects, the pre-existing house already paid that Parkland fee. So, I realize that this is not the time to talk about it other than just to make a mention of it for future consideration.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Moore?
I think until we have some control about these ADUs being used for Airbnb units, that I'm reluctant to look at expanding, or I should say removing fees that are being charged. I'd like to understand the 45% FAR ratio a little bit more. So in my example, 4,500 square foot lot, do I just go 4,500 times 0.45 and I end up with 2,002 or 2,025? And if I have a 1,000 square foot house and I'm looking at your municipal code, it looks like I have a maximum of 1,000 square feet that I would be allowed to add. So basically, I've got a 1,000 square foot ADU I could add. Is that right?
As long as it's no more than 50% of the principal
Can't be
livable,
bigger than your existing home.
of the livable area of your
Livable
existing
area.
home.
But this, I can make it the same size, right?
Of your existing home?
Yeah, so I've got a 1,000 square
1
foot
foot
house on a
smaller you could.
45.
Well, it can't be more than, so let's just say that, so you have 1,000 square foot home, livable area of your home. It can't be more than 50% of that. So there's still those control measures too.
Okay.
So
Or
you-
50% of the existing living
Yeah,
space.
so
Okay.
500
So I can go
square
to, so I can go to 500. So you,
correct.
so for this individual, you've given them 50 square feet.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like I said, there's still lots of control measures for size.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for
Okay.
someone to build 1,000 square foot ADU on, a 5,000 to 6,000 square foot lot, the stars really have to align. It'd be pretty difficult to do.
You could do it in Rancho, maybe.
Right, right, and that ultimately is the concern, because when you look at parkland dedication fees, that's the area that doesn't have any parks, and
I think that's where you're headed.
and you have 10,000 square foot lots with really small houses on it. So I could see some of these scenarios actually snowballing, where you've got a very large ADU on a 10,000 square foot lot, and then you could get pretty clever with AB 68, carve out your main house a 500 square foot junior ADU out of your old house, and give yourself a very nice ADU that you now go live in. And now you've got essentially two units in the
Commissioner Moore, I would actually
property.
do it differently. I would take the 1,200 square foot house on the 8,000 square foot lot, convert the garage first, and then go build the ADU, and then leave a shed. I still have room. Sure. Just if you wanted an example, if you want an exception, I can usually find one.
But I would note that from a parkland dedication standpoint, because the current rule sets that based on the density of the area, the original house that was constructed already paid the full parkland dedication.
In 1952.
There would be no, but that's.
Well,
that's what-
actually, Rancho Rinconada was incorporated.
2000.
And did not,
Never paid Parkland dedication
and
fees.
didn't have a park, yeah.
We have a
Well,
pool, but not a park.
Yeah, but that's, well, that's beside the point, right? I mean, everything there was built to code. There was, if there was a program in place for the county, because that was county land, if there was a program in place for the county to have parkland dedication fees assessed,
Thank
they
you.
would have been assessed in full on the, if you build a 1,000-foot house on a 10,000-foot lot, that parkland fee is the same as if you built a 4,500 square foot house.
Commissioner
Under the current
Fung,
law.
Commissioner Fung, I think the point was like we were trying to figure out how to get more Parkland fees to fund parks on the
Yeah.
east side without creating exceptions of these ADUs, which I can come up with 4 more, but
Well,
I'm going to hold
so-
off.
But I think that, the interesting question there is, in some respects, you're adding another unit, so you could say, the philosophy has been that ADUs pay a parkland dedication fee, but because they're fitting within the constraint of the buildability that was there already. If I expanded a house from 1,000 feet to 4,000 square feet, I don't believe I pay parkland dedication fees on that remodel.
No, the fee comes in because you're adding a separate unit. So
Yes,
it's
that's
considered-
right.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
mean,
I think the fact that a separate family can go and live there, and they're going to be using the parks is the key here. And while I do appreciate the fact that they have paid the thing, I don't think the area is the essence here. It's the fact that multiple families can now live there.
Right, but then you're changing the basis of the parkland dedication fee. Would you then charge, because if somebody enlarged their house, you could make the same argument, and we don't do that. This is the barrier has been that the full parkland dedication fee could be, $20,000, $30,000.
I just want to caution the commission, now you're discussing something that's not agendized, so if you have an interest in that, we can certainly circle back for a future agenda.
Sorry, I should have done my job there, actually.
Well,
That's a good point. But in the larger scope of the question, I think it's helpful as a learning mechanism, because
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out is a parkland dedication fee based on the actual construction, or is it based on the individual number of
Per
families, which was got the conversation that was there. But going back to our staff recommended action here, do we have any other questions here on the recommended actions? Any other comments to add before we go to public? Okay, let's go to the public. Jennifer Griffin. And reminder to the public, fill out the blue cards, and you've got 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, City Planning Commission. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I can tell you, any discussion of these ADUs are beyond putting me in freak-out mode. SB 50, SB 330, SB 35, I feel like politicians that I never elected and a governor that I liked a lot, used to, I feel like they have gone way beyond, overstepped their bounds, and they're instituting rules and laws for the state, and they're only from San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley. And I can tell you honestly, I have thought about this a great deal since all of these housing bills came out and the multitude of ADU bills. It has seriously caused me to question my ideas of democracy and what is happening in my state. I thought we had issues with federal problems, but we have massive problems in Sacramento. And the fact that these bills have proceeded forward without any input from the cities, and they don't want input from the cities, it makes me cringe. And when I heard the description of a junior ADU that has no bathroom, we are creating tenements we are urbanizing suburbia. Someone told me that term. And I feel like it's an assault on the suburban neighborhoods. And I don't know what we ever did to have this wrath come down. But there were 2 ADU bills in Washington State. They were AB 1797 and SB 5812. They were just like these. They would have allowed 2 ADU units in any single-family home or duplex in the state of Washington. They would have eliminated off-street parking, eliminated owner occupancy of main house, eliminated minimum lot size. They were shut down in Washington Assembly on April 18th of 2019. I don't know why, but I can understand that Washington State would have been outraged. I think that what is happening here, there must be 20 ADU bills, and they've all come out of Sacramento, Oakland, and Berkeley. I think Lori Frieden in Southern California has her own bill, and she's trying to sell off pieces of people's yards. You can sell your ADU. Well, I have a 5,000 square foot lot, and I sure don't want any minimum lot size changed. I don't want anything. Okay, all the garage conversions, that is word for word out of Sam Liccardo from San Jose. Let's get our own discussion of this. But I live in a small lot area. Yes, my neighborhood has no parks. We were incorporated in 1952, and our parks are now apartment complexes. You go back and check the history. But I think I want all of these housing bills shut down, and I believe that the mayor of Redondo Beach is trying to get that done through referendum. I don't want any of this stuff in my neighborhood. This has caused a serious cause of what is democracy in California, and this ain't democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next up, Lisa Warren.
Hi. So I'm glad, John, that you clarified that you realize, because there's language somewhere in these reports that to encourage ADUs is supposed to help with BMR, and I flat out think that's a hoax. So if that's being touted as, anyway, I know of recently built ADUs that 1 bedroom went for $3,200 a month. That's not BMR, that's not low income. Well, it might be BMR. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that that's not really the expectation, because there is language in places that says that it is. And meeting RENA allocations, that part ticks me off. Anyway, fees. You talked about, and the one slide said the fees were reduced about 50% from single family to ADUs. So I need to understand, and I think the commission needs to understand what fees those actually are. Is that just the permitting fees, design review, what is that? Because there's been mention of park dedication fees, which I do not think should be stricken, so I think that was a good decision. I hope it sticks. But I'm also wondering a lot about school impact fees. School impact fees, no one's asked about. I don't know if it's been a discussion with Housing Commission or anyone else, but they aren't insignificant. And the way I always understood them was, if you have a 3-bedroom house and you add a 4th bedroom, then you should have school impact fees charged, because you are essentially creating a new space for another body, which could potentially be a student or 2. But in my personal experience, we had to pay school impact fees when we were not changing the bedroom count of our home. And I didn't understand it. I'm still ticked off about it because I don't think that's the right way to do it. And I guess I should have questioned it then, but I think clarification on ADUs is if you are bringing in someone who's going to impact the schools, those units need to have school impact fees, just like a single-family home. And also, that brings me to sprinklers, fire sprinklers. I thought building code and state requirements as of 2018 was any new construction of residential property required fire sprinklers. So if ADUs are not having to do that, there's something very wrong, very, very wrong with that. And I also wonder about underground utilities. If single-family home is required to have underground utilities when they're remodeling at a certain degree, a new construction ADU should have the same thing. And I really need clarification on that. And those questions should be asked and answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I believe the rule in the sprinklers is that if an existing home has no sprinklers, the ADUs do not need one, and that's what's written in that current law. I agree. No, I know. I'm agreeing or disagreeing. And if you have a home that actually has sprinklers, that requires sprinklers, you would have to put sprinklers in the ADU. So I believe that's what the ruling is.
Because the next month they could remodel their home and require sprinklers and they don't have it in their ADU.
So,
It's not okay.
so okay, with no more public comment. Sorry, I just wanted to give you a card.
Just to touch on that though, if you did that, if you had no sprinklers, built an ADU, remodeled your house in such a way that required you to add sprinklers, you would have to do that in the ADU as well, right?
Not in that sequence. Not in that sequence.
Wrong button. These are really great.
Hypothetical, yeah.
Yeah, these are real great hypotheticals for our building inspector and our building official to answer, and it's not, we're amending the zoning ordinance and not the residential code.
Right.
If Lisa would like to ask that question, I can, more happy to email you tomorrow with the answer to that, to clarify.
So just to remind the commission, the only thing that's being proposed today, and it's on the agenda, is the elimination of the 10% requirement.
Yeah,
Nothing
no,
else being
understood.
changed.
Yeah,
Thank
no.
you.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if you want, take my questions and use them for FAQs, for ADUs, might save you some time as well. I think those are what people are asking, I guess. So, all right. Any motions, any things, recommendations?
Actually, we have deliberation at this point.
Yeah, I believe so.
So,
Well, do you deliberate after a motion or before a motion? You have to make a
before,
motion to
actually.
deliberate, I believe. Yeah.
well,
All right, go for it. Go for it.
no, you actually deliberate before, and then
Make a
you
motion.
decide to structure what it is you're voting on, and then you can discuss the motion. So I'm curious. This actually goes back to the earlier questions. If the state had a limit of 1,200 square feet on an ADU, do we have a problem setting 1,000 as a limit? A local limit of 1,000?
No, and that's fine. I mean, Commissioner Frank, you probably remember years ago we actually had up to 1,200,
Yes,
and
right.
we were comfortable with reducing it. Originally our interpretation was 1,200. We had to do it. Then, when HCD came out with their interpretation of the laws, they said that's just the maximum you have to go to. Cities still have the discretion to limit them in the size wise.
I actually was in support of the smaller size at that time, so I continue to be. And then I just, again, to make absolutely certain here, we're not having any discussion around fee changes, right? We understand that building, permit fees and inspection, those things were changed already, so not under discussion here. And Parkland dedication, of course, school fees are actually a state fee that's collected directly to the
Exactly.
district.
Yeah, we don't have discretion over those
Right.
fees.
So the only thing on discussion here is whether we strike the 10% rule from the municipal code, just to be clear.
Correct.
I guess my only other comment is that because this is somewhat related to the discussion that was the presentation in the Housing Commission, I think what I'll do is I will send you the set of comments that I had related to that. You know, maybe we can distribute back to the commission if they care to see it, but I won't go through them at this time.
I have to say, I'm very concerned about AB 68 and what other, because there's 200 housing bills that they started with. I don't feel as though we've got a full report on how many of the housing bills are going to be affecting the ADUs here. So in the absence of having all the information, I wish it was, you know, October 15th right now, and we know in hindsight what happened and how many ADU bills were signed.
Any other comments?
So Commissioner Moore, if I understand you correctly, you'd rather wait till October 15th?
Correct?
So Commissioner Moore, your thinking here is that it makes no sense to make these changes until we see what Sacramento does?
Right, especially since, you know, I hate to use the buzzword, local control. They're working very hard to remove that, and I feel as though we're trying to make a change while something else is already in the works.
Question to staff. If we don't change the 10%, what's the impact? Are we getting applications for things that are bigger than the 10%?
We always get questions from the public, and again, the council's direction, the work program was to try to encourage these, and and our interpretation of the direction rather was to get this done. It was to expedite some changes. We do have assembly bills, correct, that are going through, but we don't know what their timing is. It could die in committee. It could die at the Senate bill. I'm sorry, at the Senate floor. So, in anticipation of them not going through, we'll make some incentives at this point per council's direction, the work program.
I would actually comment that I think that you don't know what's going to happen with state legislation, but separately you look at the merits of this. This is very much a in this locality, what do we want to do, and if this is the time to execute it. If there were to be change down the line, then then this may be overruled, or it could be come back for future amendment as well.
So which city council suggested this? Like, what year did this come out?
This is in our current fiscal year work program.
So when was it introduced exactly?
This is in our current work program that begins for fiscal year 19 and 20. And the direction given by City Council at a public meeting is to bring these forward as quickly as the rules will change. So this is our first attempt.
So you're saying that this particular 10% rule, and can you say who introduced it exactly?
Work program is identified by the council as a whole, so I don't know exactly who introduced what, but our work program for each department, each commission is approved by the council as a body.
Was this in the January work plan discussions? I think that's a more specific question.
Perhaps I don't recall exactly which hearing it was.
But again, at that time, we had no idea about the 200 housing bills coming our way, and they didn't know it either.
Yeah, I know that. Interesting. Okay. Do we have any motions?
I'm happy to make the motion, but if we could throw that
Let's
the
get
text
the
up of what we're.
recommended action there.
Yeah. All right. So I move that we find the proposed actions are exempt from CEQA and adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino amending Chapter 19.112, accessory dwelling units as submitted in the packet.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
Discussions?
All right, I'm going to move to vote here. Or
Um,
do you have a discussion?
Well,
Commissioner
yeah,
Saxena?
actually, I would like to hear more from Commissioner Moore about what side effects she sees if we approve this now versus waiting for the state bills to go through the motions.
Let's go back to what I said originally. We have 200 housing bills that are going through the works. We've had one identified for us, AB 68. We have no idea how many other housing bills are going to be affecting ADUs also. And if we are loosening our rules now, we have no way of knowing what's going to be the end effect. So I don't want to do something without knowing all the facts. And if staff has not researched the other bills, we don't have the full information. We could go to the legislative review committee that formed, that has had 2 meetings now, and ask for their research and have them inform us what ADU bills are currently in the works, so that we can be more fully informed here. But at the moment, we're electing not to be fully informed and make a decision regardless. And that, to me, doesn't sound wise.
Okay, and what you're concerned is that we might make some changes which will actually worsen the impact of all the bills coming down the line. That while the loss of local control and some of the guidelines which come from the state might anyway be not what we would have normally done in a city, the fact that we are loosening or expanding it might make the whole situation worse, given the combination of both.
Correct.
Do other commissioners have any view on that?
I'm actually in agreement with our resident Jennifer. We have an unholy alliance of, housing lobbyists that are uninformed and, developers and politicians who are trying to change local control. So I'm not sure what's coming down the pike half the time. So all this stuff keeps changing on everybody, and it's been a huge problem in general.
And so from my standpoint, I would say the direction from the council has been, what things can we do to streamline the ADU process? Staff has identified this as an opportunity. It has fairly minimal impact because you have to have a pretty large lot for this to take place. And it would set a goal. So in that respect, I think that this, we have an objective here of try to follow the goals of the work plan, and that this is a good opportunity to do so.
Yeah,
I have no issue with this. I think this is a very minimal impact.
Yeah, I think in the work plan we have a lot of items, including reducing the fees and other things which are not a part of this motion, which might actually spur more development of this than this adjustment. So I sort of feel and agree with Commissioner Moore that this is a very small element of the bigger picture, but it sort of is setting us in a direction where we don't even know where this will end up. And so that's where I'm thinking. And while I agree in principle from what you're saying, that maybe the reduction in fees and other things, when it comes to the size of the ADUs, I do question why we should rush in with so much coming down the line.
Commissioners, may I just say, just from reading the staff report, the staff report seems to indicate that the direction of the legislation, which I have not personally researched, is to make it easier to make more ADUs. So it's unlikely, if that's a concern, that this small change would be inconsistent with the future legislation.
I don't think inconsistency is an issue here, because from what we are hearing, the future legislation is essentially overriding all local things. I think it's more a question of if they're going to be based on, if you could allow this now, you should allow this kind of a thing, and what are would that mean to the city, and whether we are rushing in not knowing what the unintended consequence of what we're doing now could be is the concern. So it could be something like,
the only unintended consequence is somebody with a large lot will be given a greater right to develop all that lot.
Mm-hmm. No, it could also be that if you already have a unit which is this, then the junior unit can be 70% of that, which automatically bumps up your junior unit size.
But that's
and all
not,
those
not
things.
in this.
Well, like, we don't know, right? That's the question.
So Commissioner Saxon, you're worried about unintended consequences?
Yes, I'm worried about unintended consequences of what might happen based on what will be imposed on the city by the state, which could be leveraged off what existing rules we have.
And Commissioner Fung, you're thinking about this as a way to spur or allow more ADU creation? Or no impact?
I just think that there's a direction not only from, I mean, there's a state direction to say, what things can we do to promote the development of ADUs? There's a direction from our city council as well to do that.
Yeah, I think
Right.
this requirement or this proposal is tweaking the build area side. It's not really encouraging new. I think the discussion about fees or not having onerous requirements to put solar or something could spur. This is just allowing the size of the area to grow without regards to anything else. And that's what I'm questioning. And what future unintended consequences of this could be, given that there's going to be a significant loss of control if the state bills pass.
So I would only say, you don't know, you never can know what future legislation will bring. The only thing you can do is make the right decisions for our community now. I can definitely see it. You could make the point. This is not a change worthy of hearing at this point, or a standalone.
Yeah, essentially that's my case. The standalone case is.
But I would just step back from that and say the question before you today is, is this consistent with the goals and objectives of direction that we have? And if it is, then we should act.
I think that's what I'm questioning, whether allowing larger units is the goal, or the goal is to allow more units to be made. And this is going towards larger units. It's not specifically encouraging more units, and what the unintended consequences could be is my concern.
I think considering that our mayor and vice mayor formed the Legislative Review Committee, that they are sending us a message about the housing legislation and how important it is for us to understand it and see what's going to happen in the future. And I feel as though you can look at that as saying, we need to wait and see what's going to happen, and don't go making changes when you can't predict what's going to get signed at the end of September.
I continue to believe that's a misinterpretation of what the Legislative Action Committee is supposed to be doing. They're trying to make a centralized decision, put a centralized decision before the council about whether, the staff can make positions advocate one way or the other, not to make an analysis of a full analysis of all the bills, right? In fact, that's actually, I believe, the staff's job. But I think that the way that I would say that the kinds of numbers of ADU units we're talking about in the last year, it was really, I think it's 14 permits, right? So it's not an enormous number. The larger of a lot you have, and potentially the larger of if you have a large lot which is fully developed, then this is not an issue. If you have a large lot which is not fully developed, then this I don't know, it's a tiny increment that makes that more financially viable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the extent of it.
If staff can interject just really quickly.
Please do.
Thank you. It's almost two separate issues, what the state has coming down the line and what we're proposing right now. I mean, the state could override every single thing we've done in the past 3 or 4 years, to be honest with you. What staff has been directed with the work program is to try to find ways to make this to encourage more people to do this. Staff, we're the boots on the ground. We hear it every day from people who want to come and do ADUs. Some people are discouraged because of the fees. So in the work program, some folks on a 6,000 square foot lot don't want to be limited to having a 600 square foot ADU. They might want a 750 square foot ADU because the extra 150 square feet gives maybe a larger rental income because they're retired or whatever else, or they have their kids moving in and they have grandkids that need the extra space and whatnot too. So it gives greater flexibility into what they can do on the site. That being said, we were the quickest way to get this through, and the way we felt that was least harmful to existing standards on site, and that still met the 45% FAR, and knowing that there are further constraints to within our zoning ordinance that probably wouldn't facilitate 1,000 square foot ADU on a 4,500 square foot lot, or even a 6,000 square foot lot, and we thought this is pretty harmless, but it could be that extra carrot where someone could have a 650 square foot ADU on a 5,000 square foot lot, which have been built in the past, in the recent past too, when our ordinance was a lot more permissive of larger ADUs.
Commissioner Moore.
May I mention 3 ADU bills that are in the works?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So here's AB 68 by Ting, accessory dwelling units, significantly amends the statewide standards that apply to locally adopted ordinances concerning accessory dwelling units. Changes include prohibits minimum lot size requirements, requires at least 800 square feet per ADU, requires approval within 60 days, and prohibits owner occupancy requirements. AB 881, Bloom, accessory dwelling units, prohibits a local jurisdiction from requiring a property owner to live in the main house or one of the accessory structures. And the last one, SB 13, Wykowski, accessory dwelling units, prohibits local jurisdictions from imposing any impact fees on ADUs less than 750 square feet and limit the charge on accessory dwelling units, ADUs, over 750 square feet to 25% of the fees otherwise charged for a new single-family dwelling on the same lot. Prohibits replacement parking when a garage, carport, or covered parking structure is demolished or converted into an ADU. Prohibits owner occupancy requirements, and I think I keep seeing that prohibits owner occupancy requirements, and that Cupertino has issues with high rentals, and then our ADUs being used as Airbnb.
Okay, any more questions? Any more things? We're in the middle of a vote.
So they're
We have a
all,
motion in play here.
those are all still not laws. I think that what this does is it brings consistency. If you have a house of any given size on a lot of any given size, right now, there are certain cases where, in general, the ADU, you can construct an ADU to utilize the space which is you were permitted to have as part of your main house and not have it, but didn't build yet. And this just basically makes it, with this limit, makes it more consistent with the house you could have built, the single house you could have built. So,
I'd like to start the vote. I think we're going in circles at the moment, so. You guys okay with voting, guys? All right, I'm gonna put this to the vote. Let's start a vote. All right, everyone there? Here we go. Motion fails, not motion, recommended action fails, 1-3-0. So. I do want to make a comment. I know
With Commissioner Takahashi absent.
absent, yes. I do want to make a note. I know staff worked very, very hard on this. I know you were looking at other options to improve the ability to get to ADUs. I am personally very concerned about not having an owner occupancy requirement. That's being struck out by all these interesting bills. But I think there are other things maybe we can look at together to see how we can figure out how to make this easier.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think if we were operating in isolation without anything coming down the line, I would have been very supportive of this. I simply don't understand. I don't know what the unknown unknowns are here, and I would rather not take the risk, is what I would suggest. Because I think you made a passionate point that some people might build something if it allows, it's a 750 versus 600. Well, I do believe that there might be some cases, but people who are motivated enough will live in 600 because we do have a pretty decent housing shortage here, and 600 square foot is a reasonably sized thing in most parts of the world. So I echo, thank you for bringing this over, but probably let's wait, see what happens, and then revisit this issue.
Yeah, I would say actually the two houses across from my house in Rancho Rinconada, probably have somewhere between 28 residents between the two of those homes. Rooms are being rented out piecemeal. And there are corporations that are buying homes that are renting homes out that are 5-bedroom homes, adding a 6-bedroom into there, charging $2,500 for rent and paying the homeowners $8,000 for the rent and keeping the rest. There's a lot of that going on in the neighborhoods right now.
Yeah, and I've heard stories of people actually renting out rooms in Fremont for the school districts for exactly the same thing. And I think it needs a more holistic look at it than just doing this.
All right, any old business? I don't think so. Any new business? All right, quick staff and commission reports going down the line. Commissioner Moore.
Just going to mention one event I went to. It was the San Jose State University Economic Summit, and I'll show you one slide so that you didn't need to stay for the whole event. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can read that at your own leisure. The GDP Growth Outlook is around a little over 2%, and the presenter introduced the word miserableism and said that our sense of reality is warped and that we are living in the best of times. So you can read the positives and negatives on your own time, but this was a really great event, and I believe it's annual. Thank you.
Looks like some high-class problems there. Okay. Commissioner Fung.
I attended a number of activities, city-related. There was a public outreach for the Carmen Road Bridge. Attended that. Actually very close in tracking with the slide Commissioner Moore put up. I went to something which is a budget perspectives review for public school funding, but it actually includes a significant portion about the economic conditions of the state, which were interesting, sometimes scary. I attended the community meeting, outreach community meeting for El Paseo de Saratoga, and the city manager's reception, which was last night, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioner Saxena.
I attended the mayor's meeting last week. It was interesting. The vice mayor was there. The meeting almost was as big as a planning commission meeting. It lasted for more than 2 hours. We discussed a whole bunch of issues, and the deputy mayor had a few thoughts on almost everything. I didn't bring up the point that the library expansion, the projected cost is $1,900 per square foot, which is way, way beyond anything I could imagine.
You could build a data center or clean lab with that.
Yeah, so I guess the need to benchmark and evaluate what's happening there is important.
Wonderful. I was at the community meeting for the Del Paseo. I saw Commissioner Moore there as well as Commissioner Fung. I've been spending a lot of time with residents, trying to understand what they would want for a future Valco. Just very curious, trying to understand what importance to them. Between a mix of retail. I've been talking to some affordable housing activists about how to bring affordable housing to the city and what options are there, and also spending a lot of time trying to understand the history of the city. So I think we've got a lot of great history here, a lot of good residents that have been here for a long time trying to share that history to all of us. So other than that, nothing on my end. So are we good?
I'd like to mention that we did have 3 planning commissioners at that meeting, and we did not all 3 speak.
From a Brown Act perspective, we didn't talk to each other, yes. All right. Normally not motion to adjourn, I assume we're okay with adjournment. We are done with this meeting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for staying here, and thanks to our 2 guests there who didn't even ask any questions.
observe a domesticated human family in their natural habitat, known to their species as the backyard.
Hey, you think I should light it now?
I think it's good.
Yeah?